Hi to the network and welcome to this introduction to the Urban Waters Learning Network, Equitable Development and Anti-Displacement Collaborative's upcoming session, an introduction to exploring the intersections of environmental justice and equitable development in infrastructure investments. My name is Renee Mazurek. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm River Network's Resilient Cities Manager and a team member of the Urban Waters Learning Network, calling in from Asheville, North Carolina. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Erin Kanzig. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Renee.
Can you introduce yourself and tell us about your role at River Network?
Yeah, my name is Erin Kanzig. I also use she, her pronouns. I am River Network's Policy and Research Associate, and I am based in Detroit, Michigan.
Thanks for being here, Erin. Erin is going to be talking to us a little bit about policy and environmental justice and some of the new laws that are coming up. But as a brief introduction to the Urban Waters Learning Network, we are co-led by River Network and Groundwork USA and funded by the EPA Office of Water. We're a national network of nonprofits, government agencies, learning institutions, and businesses working to conserve, restore, and revitalize our nation's waterways. The Urban Waters Learning Network delivers tools, training, and funding to support the work while fostering solutions to advance water equity and environmental justice. Gentrification and displacement related to restoration and resilience efforts have been a concern of the network members for many years. In 2020, the Urban Waters Learning Network convened leaders from the network to create what we call the Urban Waters Learning Network Equitable Development and Anti-Displacement Collaborative. I would like to acknowledge that this is not my lived experience, but I'm sharing information about this today based on years of research and my conversations with the members of the collaborative. In addition to providing a space for leaders with similar experiences from across the country, the collaborative has produced webinars, contributed to a story map, and presented a workshop at River Rally on anti-displacement practices. All of those resources are available on our collaborative landing page on our Urban Waters Learning Network website, plus more additional resources. We met in June of 2022 at River Rally, and since then, we've been exploring this intersection of environmental justice, defining disadvantaged communities, the new large infrastructure investments that are coming down from the federal government, and equitable development, which has led us here today. For context, I think that it is important to create some common language and definitions around these topics. So gentrification is a process of neighborhood change that increases property values. Green gentrification can and does occur, for example, when a stream like the Sawmill River is daylighted or green infrastructure is installed. This is not inherently bad. All people deserve clean and healthy environments. What it often leads to, though, is displacement. And displacement is when people are pushed out of their neighborhoods. And gentrification is one of the causes of displacement. This doesn't have to happen if intentional steps are taken to reduce displacement pressures. And that's what we're calling equitable development. And in this story map that the Urban Waters Learning Network developed, there are some strategies highlighted. That's not where I want to focus right now, though. I want to look at some of the historical context for where we are. So this is one of the Homeowners Loan Corporation residential security maps that were developed in the 1930s and the 1940s. This one is for New Orleans, where there was a color coding system that ranked neighborhoods based on whether or not they were eligible for loans, red being the lowest and green being the highest ranking. These maps have enduring impacts. So there's a research that shows that 91% of the areas that were classified as green or the highest grade are middle to upper income today, and 74% of the areas classified as red or the lowest grade are low to moderate income today. And our colleagues at Groundwork USA have what is called the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program that links the relationship between these redline communities and heightened climate risks like heat and flooding. And this quote from the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program, "Our neighborhoods do not look the way they do by accident, and the mitigation measures needed to reduce the risk will not appear by accident either." So this is where I'm talking about being very intentional about how we invest infrastructure dollars. What happened after redlining in the 1950s, then something called urban renewal, and this was also a large influx of money from the federal government to redevelop the blighted cities. And so what ended up happening between 1955 and 1966 is that more than 300,000 people were actually displaced from their communities, and they were often pushed into places that were even worse. So how does this all relate? This is where we come back, and there's a major concern currently with the new infrastructure investments, and because those investments will also be allocated to disadvantaged communities because of the Justice 40 initiative, will the communities get to stay and benefit from the restoration and resilience efforts? So the way that the governments and policies define environmental justice or disadvantaged communities or similar terms will be really important. And now I'm going to pass this on to Erin to provide some definitions and examples.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction, Renee, to some of these interlocking issues from the past that are continuing on into the present. So I just wanted to flag some other ways in which River Network is hoping to provide support to network members to give examples of state policy successes through our State Policy Hub. The State Policy Hub was established last year, first focusing on drinking water policies, addressing issues like lead, PFAS, water affordability, and water access issues. And so it highlights policies from across the country that will hopefully be inspiring and useful to folks in other states to pull from to get ideas. We also include interviews with advocates and policy language on the hub. So this is just a screenshot on this slide. This year we expanded to some additional topics, including environmental justice policies. So from a policy perspective, addressing environmental justice through law and regulation has ramped up in states at a faster pace than the federal government, at least until very recently, like really in the past year and a half. The federal government has been a lot more intentional about focusing on environmental justice, but previously states were really taking the lead. So I just wanted to point you all in this direction. And I'll go ahead and give some examples of how environmental justice is defined by states and how different definitions of environmental justice communities, disadvantaged communities, or disproportionately impacted communities, all of which are somewhat overlapping, can really shape how investments occur. So Renee, you could go to the next slide. So this is a definition of environmental justice from Washington State that I think is really a lot more holistic than some other examples. It says that environmental justice means the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, rules, and policies. Environmental justice includes addressing disproportionate environmental and health impacts in all laws, rules, and policies with environmental impacts by prioritizing vulnerable populations and overburdened communities, the equitable distribution of resources and benefits, and eliminating harm. So this is definitely a multifaceted definition that includes meaningful participation of folks in not only how policies are being issued on the ground, but how they are developed in the first place. And so when we think about the Justice 40 initiative at the federal level, there are ways in which some states are going to be better primed for allocating those funds than other states that maybe don't lack this already established framework around environmental justice. You could go to the next slide. And so again, there's this sort of technical aspect of environmental justice policies that are getting into the definitions of different communities and how we are identifying where investments are needed. And so again, in Washington state, they use the term overburdened community, meaning a geographic area where vulnerable populations face combined multiple environmental harms and health impacts, and includes, but is not limited to, highly impacted communities. And then they have a definition in another law that they refer to here. For vulnerable populations, Washington includes socioeconomic factors like unemployment, high housing and transportation costs relative to income, limited access to nutritious food and adequate health care, linguistic isolation, and other factors. And so just considering equitable development and gentrification issues, you can see that if you're including these kinds of indicators, that will hopefully touch on who is going to be impacted by policies and investment. And I just want to flag that the Federal Justice 40 initiative, which was created by executive order by President Biden, I think you can go to the next slide, was actually modeled after a law in New York. So there's a Climate Leadership and Policy Protection Act in New York that was passed, and that requires that 40% of the benefits of climate spending in New York must go to disadvantaged communities. So again, the federal government is being influenced by actions that states are taking, and so it's great to know if your state is taking action on its own around environmental justice issues and how specific types of investment are being spent. This is just a quick little timeline, and we'll get more into this in our session in December. But there's sort of several moving parts, and it's a lot to keep track of. The Justice 40 initiative, as I was saying, was established by President Biden in January of 2021. And that is directing, excuse me, that government agencies establish specific programs that are going to be covered by the Justice 40 initiative, in which 40% of benefits are going to disadvantaged communities. And then we had the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL. It's also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So there's lots of acronyms flying around. That was passed in November of 2021, and that really invested a large amount of money into a variety of sectors, including water infrastructure, energy, clean energy, and housing. And so that's affecting the Justice 40 initiative just because it's really ramping up the amount of money that agencies now have to distribute to these programs. So agencies, including the Council on Environmental Quality, Environmental Protection Agency, Housing and Urban Development, and other federal agencies are working on implementing Justice 40 in specific covered programs. So not all programs are required to allocate 40% of benefits, but there is a very long list of them that are. And those agencies all are developing what are known as equity action plans to achieve Justice 40 goals. So those documents should be outlining accountability mechanisms, identifying metrics on how they are progressing on their goals, and creating sort of some metrics on how progress is occurring over the coming years. And then another piece of legislation was passed this August called the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. And that included additional funding for some Justice 40 programs. So again, as federal agencies are coming up with these plans on how to actually achieve Justice 40 goals, there will be a lot of, hopefully, opportunities for communities to have a say in how that money is invested and how they are included in those conversations and decisions. You can go to the next slide. So this is a screenshot on the right of the CEQ's Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. This was developed and is currently still sort of in beta form, so it's not in its final version. There are some issues with it, but there are different indicators that they include in this mapping tool to identify specific communities that they consider disadvantaged. And you can see on this one, although I can hardly see it, that there are housing indicators as well as indicators of income, transit, and other clean energy and energy efficiency indicators, among others. And so you can use this tool to look at your neighborhood or city or town and see sort of what types of indicators might designate your community as disadvantaged. One thing that's a little bit confusing about this is that there's sort of an in or out designation of you're either a disadvantaged community or not using this tool, and there's not clear consensus across federal agencies if they are going to use this mapping tool to determine disadvantaged communities or if they're going to come up with other methods. The Justice 40 initiative is focused on these 6 areas that are in those colorful blocks. So clean energy and energy efficiency, affordable and sustainable housing, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, clean transit, training and workforce development, and development of critical clean water infrastructure. So again, a lot of overlap when we're thinking about the impacts of gentrification and development on all 6 of these benefit areas. I think I can go to the next slide. And then here I have pulled up some examples of guidance from the Federal Office of Budget and Management of benefits to disadvantaged communities. So sorry if my highlighting is actually covering up the text a little bit on that one. But just as an example, in the area around affordable and sustainable housing, some of those benefits that we would like to potentially see would be availability and access to affordable green housing, reduction in displacement, reduction in housing cost burden. So they are laying out like pretty explicitly in this document that displacement is a concern and that there should be steps taken through these programs to reduce that risk. And on the left in this slide is just an example of one federal agency HUD's programs that are covered by the Justice 40 initiative. So again, there's lots of different grant opportunities through these various programs that may impact or be available to your community. I think that I'll turn it back over to you, Renee.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was all such helpful information. I definitely learned from your presentation. to hear from a panel of experts working on different levels of EJ policy and equitable development strategies at the national, state, and local levels. Join us for our live virtual session hosted by the Urban Waters Learning Network, Equitable Development and Anti-Displacement Collaborative in December. Click the link on the registration page, secure your spot, and share your questions with us. Our panel will do brief introductions of themselves and their work, then be available for discussion with participants. Come ready to interact. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much.